So this is the first episode of the podcast which hasn't been streamed live. Welcome to episode 16. This is, as usual, Swift package indexing, but we're trying something a little bit different this week. Again, a lot of this is an experimentation of what works for us, what works for the people who are listening, and this time we're trying a offline recording, so hopefully no lag issues or anything like that we have had for the last couple of weeks today. This will still go up to YouTube, but it will go up as not a live stream, as just a regular video. And of course, it will be published on the package index or package indexing podcast feed as well. So, how are you doing, Sven? You doing well?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Let's hope the connection holds up this week. Apologies, everyone. That was my internet connection that that sort of played a trick on us, and we've made these changes effectively to try and remedy that and prevent that from happening again. Not sure if we'll be able to go back to a live YouTube streamed recording with the situation as it is right now with my network, but we'll do our best to maybe bring that back if that's possible.
I think what we've probably done is we've tried to do too much all at once. To do a fully live streamed YouTube version of a podcast when we've never really done this before was probably a little bit ambitious. And this feels like something which is maybe slightly less ambitious, which is good.
Yeah, why would we approach this different than programming, right?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So what have you been up to with the package index? I know there's been a lot of work in the last couple of weeks around DocC. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Sven?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned this last time. We've set up a DocC preview feature on our staging environment. What that means is this is building documentation with an upcoming compiler version, or DocC version. It's from the Nightly Swift 5.8 toolchain. So what we do in our staging environment, instead of building the documentation or even the packages with 5.7, we've dropped in the Nightly, and that allows us to run with new features. And particular, this one feature by Sofia Rodriguez, which is quick navigation, and that's a really nice feature. I think we also mentioned this last week or last time, but it's worth mentioning again what it actually does. This allows you on a documentation page to hit the / key or Command Shift O to bring up a quick search hover, Spotlight or Launchbar, these sorts of quick search features, um, which runs on the documentation page and allows you to search for symbols and everything. And I've tried this in our staging environment, and it's just great. I can't wait until we actually have this available in our production environment for all packages. And key is all packages here, because in our staging environment, we're not building for all packages because we can't really run the whole system, twice for staging and for production. So instead, what we're doing here, we have allow listed a small set of packages, 3 right now, for which we're doing this. And these are our own semantic version package, our SPI manifest package, and the argument parser package by Apple. These are the 3 packages we're currently doing this for. If you have packages that you would like to try this out with, let us know. We can onboard additional packages. It just shouldn't be, like dozens and dozens, but it's quite easy and feasible for us to extend that a little bit beyond the 3 that we have right now. So yeah, that's it on that feature. Did you have a chance to take a look at that?
I did, and I mean, I love this feature. I think it's great. The only thing I was going to say is one thing that came up yesterday in. So Sven and I are both part of the Apple documentation work group, which is one of these um, Swift work groups that Apple have set up, and we were having a talk yesterday about how we might um, start to roll this out when 5.8 comes, and it's one of those things which is quite a little frustrating because it's already working, which is great,
Yeah.
and And yet it may be, well, it will definitely be at least several weeks, if not several months, until we can actually roll this out um, onto the production site. Because one thing that we've got to do is we've got to first of all move our entire project to 5.8, and then we can get the analysis working on 5.8, and then we'll do a build system, because of course all of this is reliant on that basic build system that we use for compatibility testing. And so it's becoming quite a job to move all of that infrastructure forward before we can roll a feature out like this. And what we're doing right now is we have a separate beta. Well, in fact, it's not even a beta; it's a nightly toolchain, isn't it? That we've installed on one of the builders, and then in that build script, we're switching to that toolchain just for these specific documentation builds of these specific packages, which is okay. Like, it's a fine thing to do, but it's there's a lot of dependencies on all these systems, and it feels to me a little overwhelming a little bit on this.
Yeah. Yeah, this is absolutely true. Like, if you look at the release cadence, we have typically 2 point releases, right? One in spring around March and one in the fall around September. So chances are 5.8 will be release ready, or released, like officially released in March. At least that's when 5.6 came out last year, right? So that would mean it's another more than 3 months until that will actually be live in production. Now, in the past, we've actually worked around this. I remember we built 5.3 or 5.4, and had it in our matrix before it was actually released. And you're right, it is easier if we move our project to the latest version, because then we can run the analysis with the same Swift version that the project is built with. But that's not a requirement. We can actually run the server on 5.7 and run analysis on 5.8. We wouldn't even have to run analysis on 5.8. We could keep that on 5.7, and just run an additional build, add 5.8 as a supported build option even when it's in beta. The only thing that wouldn't work in that case is if someone submits a purely 5.8 and later package, we wouldn't be able to ingest that. I think that might be the way to do it, to support builds for 5.8 while not supporting pure 5.8 and later packages yet. That might be the sort of in-between solution that isn't too much work all at
Right.
once for us, while also not waiting until March.
I think the other thing that might be worth, and I think it could be along the same lines as you were just saying there, is we currently run analysis inside that same base image, don't we? And so we could have either a completely different base image for analysis and ingestion and all the rest of it, or we could even move those onto a separate server and have analysis completely independent from the hosting of the actual site. So there are lots of things that we could do to reduce some of these dependencies, but at the moment it is all kind of built on top of everything's built on top of that base image.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, what we did is we installed the new toolchain inside the base image in addition to the
Yes. Hmm.
normal compiler version. So that is a fairly simple thing to do. It's just, if we can shave off a little bit of extra complexity there, that might be worthwhile. If
Exactly.
if the
Yeah.
only thing we lose is 5.8 later packages, I think that's okay, while it's not in release. But so I'm sure we'll figure something out, and be just, we'd probably be so eager to get this in production that we'll figure something out before March.
But generally, certainly in the projects I've worked on, as long as budget isn't an issue, having servers do as few things as possible each is always a good idea.
Yeah, definitely.
um, so that's good. And I think that the feature itself is just great. And it's a great feature not only for the Swift Package Index, but it's a great feature for anybody using Docsy to generate their documentation, no matter where it's hosted. If you haven't had a chance to check out how it's implemented, I would recommend going to the staging site. In fact, I'll pull it up on the video version. Here it is. So this is the SPI manifest documentation on our staging site. So if you're on the staging site, just go to, if you're on the Swift Package Index site, just add staging at the beginning there. And all you do is if you hit the slash button, like Sven said, you get a chance to search through the documentation right there in a quick bar. And if you click through, it'll of course move through to that documentation. So for audio listeners, that obviously you didn't see that, but go to the package index, SPI manifest, switch to the staging site, and then go to the documentation and hit the // key. I have actually, over the last few days, been preparing for a talk, which I'm going to give on this Friday. So I'm heading down to the Server-Side Swift conference on Thursday afternoon, and then on Friday I'm going to give a talk, and the title of my talk is rather ridiculous, as with all of my talks. The title is how I accidentally started running the largest open source Vapor website. So that's been the focus of my last few days, of just making sure that talk is in good shape. It's only a short talk; it's a 10-minute talk, and I'm going to basically tell the story of how the beginnings of the Swift Package Index started out, and then a quick recap of progress so far, and then a little talk about the future, all crammed into, well, actually at the moment I did a run through last night and it's about 13 minutes, so I need to cut it out, cut a little more out at the moment, but hopefully I'll be able to do that before Friday. Otherwise, I'll just have to talk really fast, which is never good.
I was going to ask, how well can you speed talk?
Yeah, well, I think that's obviously not the right way to cut it down. I've already cut out probably 40% of the talk because the first draft that I sent you, Sven, was about 20 to 25 minutes long. But but I will definitely cut a little bit more out. But yeah, it's been fun to kind of put that talk together, and it made me think about the first time I had the idea for the package index, and I didn't obviously have the name, the package index, or anything like that then, but it was actually quite a few years ago, and I'll tell this bit of the story now. In fact, maybe if I can tell this bit of the story now, I can cut this bit out of Friday's performance now.
Oh, and you link to the podcast. Excellent.
That's right. Yeah. So it was WWDC 2016, and they had some big announcements for Package Manager. If I remember rightly, Package Manager was released in 2014, and in 2016, I thought, okay, so I think maybe next year they're going to support iOS and macOS projects with Package Manager. And I remember standing in I don't know whether you ever went to the Moscone Center for WWDC, did you, Sven?
I was once, yes, in 2011. Once, that's the first and only time I went.
So on that ground floor, as you come in from the street, there are two huge escalators going up to the first floor.
Yeah.
And it's where they do registration and that kind of stuff. And I remember coming out of one of the sessions, or it was actually a lab. I remember coming out of the lab, and I walked into that area, and I was thinking, well, so CocoaPods is totally dominant at this point. Swift Package Manager doesn't include any kind of, like, the CocoaPods was a combination, or still is a combination, of both a package manager and also a package search engine. And I remember thinking, well, that's not going to work so good when if and when the package manager becomes the dominant tool. And so it was back in 2016. I originally had this idea of well, we're going to need an independent, separate package index. Um, it actually turned out to be several years before Apple supported iOS and macOS projects with Package Manager, and so nothing actually happened on it for a few more years after that. But that was the original. That was the original idea,
Yeah, I mean,
long time ago.
I don't even remember when that started, but it's been, I mean, it's coming up on 3 years, right, since we started working on this together, and this was a year in after you'd actually started. So,
That's right.
um,
So the original SwiftPM library that launched in August 2019. Um, and then we started. So what was quite surprising to me is, in my mind, the gap between me launching SwiftPM library and you emailing was quite short. But in actual fact, it was April the next year that you emailed me, and then we worked on it from April, and we launched it in June, which is not very long. Because I think it
yeah,
was
that
it
was
was it was late April,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it was around mid late, and until we actually started was like the April 22nd or something like that. Um, and then it went really fast. I mean, a lot of that what was easy to. This is actually really nice in terms of greenfield projects. Just to reminisce a bit, is you don't have to struggle with a spec because the spec was the original Ruby implementation, and it was I could absorb it. Just to give a bit perspective, I think you were busy with a contract at the time, right? So your time was actually quite limited, which wasn't wasn't actually terrible because sometimes it's when you have something that you know exactly how to implement more or less, and you can actually make a lot of headway on your own. So that lined up really nicely, and implementing it with the template effectively being there
Yeah.
allowed us to do this really quickly and hit that WWDC milestone. And we didn't set out to do that, right? We sort of, you know, mid-April we said, actually, this should be doable. We're close enough to have something. That was fun.
That's exactly right. I remember us deliberately not setting a deadline, but then actually as we got a few weeks into it, thinking, I wonder if we could hit the WWDC deadline. And we did. We did. We got it launched by that point. So yeah, there's a bit of a trip down memory lane to the beginning of the package index development.
I thought we should maybe quickly mention that the authors change went live. So this has been in
Yes, it
staging
did.
only up to now. Yeah, and this is a feature by Javier. I don't actually know his last name. I looked around, but I can't find his last name mentioned anywhere. So he's a um, what was the program called? The Swift mentorship
It was the
program.
Swift mentorship program, and I should definitely know that this feature went live because I put it live. It is kind of ridiculous that I'd forgotten that. But we've talked about this feature before, um, uh,
Yeah,
and it's nice to finally see it on production. One thing which I think we should just mention is it's not yet documented. There will be a blog post coming, but it's not yet documented. But there is a way to override whatever we have assumed your author information to be with a string containing whatever you would like it to be if you were a package author. So you do that through this SPI YAML file, and you can, well, there is a blog post on its way, probably after I get back from this conference, but there is a blog post that will explain how to do that. But if you're not happy with the the author information as it's being shown right now, you can already change it, and we will tell you how to change it shortly.
excellent. Cool. Yeah, I think that wraps up the news, doesn't it?
It does. Let's do some package recommendations.
Let's do it.
Um,
Do
I will
you want to kick it
kick us
off?
off, yeah, with a package by OpenAlloc. which I presume is a company rather than a person, and it's called Swift Compactor. And this is a really nice little, it's very simple, or at least simple in scope, package that can take a number and display it in a very compact way. So, for example, you can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as a number and have it represented as 1.2 million. So 1.2 and then the capital M. Or if it were time, if you would pass it through a time compactor, and it would come out as 14.3D. And I think that is a really nice little package. Again, simple in scope. This is not something that's going to go in right at the root of your project. But if you have something where you're displaying user inputted numbers or input numbers that have come off the internet and you don't know what the range of those numbers is, I can see using something like this compactor could be really a nice time saver.
Yeah, it's really nice. I actually had that on my extended list of candidates for this week as well. I spotted that and found it really interesting, especially because it covers things you wouldn't, that you might be tempted to say, well, I can divide by, within ranges, divide by 1,000 or a million, and then knock it out. But it's also doing the same thing for seconds conversion into days and years and that stuff.
Yeah.
That's where it goes that little extra step and gives you additional functionality that you probably don't want to deal with if you're rolling your own there. So, really nice package. Yeah.
And there are three compactors that come with it. There's a number compactor, which will just take the number and display it in as compact form as possible. A currency compactor, and then obviously there's time compactor that we've just been talking about as well. So the README is very good. I would recommend checking it out. That's Swift Compactor by OpenAlloc.
Nice. Right, my first package this week is called FunMove Kit by Sven Tiggy. Um, and I found this interesting for a couple of reasons. So this is FunMove, for those who don't know, is a Dutch e-bike manufacturer. They have these fancy bikes which have like smart stuff going on. So they actually ship their own app. The bikes have certain functionality like locks. You can change the bell sound, so it has a built-in speaker, and you can apparently configure that sound to a certain degree. I'm not sure if you can actually upload your own file to play, but it certainly has some configuration options. You can change the light mode, I guess how it strobes potentially. Um, Also the power level, and this is where it gets really interesting, um, because there's a discussion to be had about software ethics to a degree, because changing the power level might not be legal in all jurisdictions. So in certain European countries, or in many of them, if not all of them, I'm not entirely sure, there is a maximum speed limit on e-bikes. They have different regulation if they exceed 25 kilometers per hour. Potentially you can mess with this on your own. You should not, and the README actually states that in a disclaimer. This is an unofficial library, and it is illegal in certain jurisdictions to mess with some of the settings you might have access to doing this. But I found this interesting because how do you approach this? You have a capability, you own the bike, you know how to access it. It's apparently not locked down. It's not, you're not hacking around really, if there's no attempt made to hide the functionality. So I found that interesting. Do you have any thoughts around how you know around this area?
My expertise with e-bikes is not very much, and I didn't know this was a thing until you just mentioned it right now. Um, it's always this kind of thing where, um, and actually, I've already started writing Friday's iOS Dev Weekly comment, and it's not around ethics so much, but it's around it's clearly this week everybody is talking about Chat GPT, which is a
Mm.
remarkable piece of software, but makes me deeply uncomfortable because we're so
Yeah.
keen to just instantly trust these things. And so, if you're expecting an upbeat and optimistic introduction to this week's iOS Dev Weekly newsletter, maybe skip till next week. um,
That's quite the
but
sales
it's
pitch there.
yeah, exactly, yes. It's definitely along the same lines of what's the famous line from Jurassic Park? We were so excited that we could do something we didn't think about whether we should, or whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's something to always bear in mind. You know, what are you doing with the capabilities that you have? And that's maybe not a hugely complex example here, and it's easy enough to, not to mess with it. But oftentimes it's not that simple. It's not that easy.
Yeah, I do. Looking at the app itself, which is on the screen now for people watching on YouTube, um, there's a picture of an app that uses this library, and it shows the lock state, and it shows the battery, and it shows the speed limit, and all the rest of it. And it has little Siri phrases underneath each of them, and one of them is this power level, and it says, say to Siri, set power level. I can imagine you cycling along, and you see the hill ahead of you, and you just say, Siri, set the power level to maximum.
I'm telling you, just to go off topic maybe a bit, but I bought a new and decent e-bike 3 months ago, and I previously had a very cheap folding little e-bike that I used for commuting, and I switched to this new one because I had used the other one for 2 years, and I knew I was going to cycle, keep cycling, and that's pretty much the only thing I do to get to places these days. E-bikes are just amazing, and having any sort of control over the assist level is just great because you won't skip on journeys. You actually seek out journeys because you know on a good day you just cycle on your own with maybe no assist or a little assist, but if you feel like it, you can turn yourself into a Tour de France athlete and just zoom up these hills. It's just amazing. I love e-bikes. It's fantastic. I think this is an amazing development, and I can't wait to see what newer models will bring. It's fun times.
I've not used one yet, and I'm curious about them. But my bike is a non e-bike. It is a regular bike where the only power comes from how hard you push on the pedals. Not as much fun. Okay, my next recommendation or package that I found interesting this week is a package called RSwift, and it's by Mathis Caddick, and I think this has been around for, well, it's been around for a very long time. It's been developed for 7 years. So this is not a new package, but it did have a new release. So I'll talk about the release in a second, but just to give people an idea of the actual package itself, it generates fully typed, auto completion ready, compile time checked resources for all of a Mac or an iOS application's icons, colors, views, whatever's in the XC Assets bundle. It's going to have a look at that, and it's going to generate you a Swift file that turns all those stringly typed things into actual strongly typed Swift code. So, for example, you could do, after you started to use this, if you had a image in your assets file called settings icon, you could do r.image.settings icon, and it would give you that UI image or NS image back. So it's a great little package. It takes away that whole weak point of assets development, which is if you get that string wrong, you're not going to know until runtime, and it's very easy to ship a version of an application without checking every image and every color and every resource that you've put in the file. The reason it's worth mentioning this week is that 8 days ago there was a release of a version 7, major release of 7, and it adds a Swift build tool plugin. So you can now make this just a part of your build process. Now, of course, you could previously do that with Xcode, build phases. But it's interesting to see how packages are adopting Swift build tools, and I thought this was a notable one because I think this is used by a lot of projects, and certainly it's a great idea, and I'm happy to see that people are adding build tool support into their packages.
Great. That's really nice. I think it also sort of helps a bit to tell you whether you have actually set this up correctly, right? Because I remember I'm not doing a whole lot of UI development, but every time I do, I put something in, then I use the stringly identifiers only to find at runtime the thing is nil because
Right.
some location wasn't right. But I suppose this would already tell you once it's generated the file whether it could actually find the resources in the right places, right?
Yes. Although
Excellent.
those resources are in the XC assets, so Xcode kind of helps with a lot of that stuff. But
Right. Yeah.
it's a great
Yeah.
project. It's been around for a long time, so yeah, I'd recommend it. So that's R Swift, um, and Sven, your next recommendation.
Right. My next one is grdb.swift by Gwendal Rowe. Um, this is a SQLite database library. I think it's one of the two most popular ones, the other one being just SQLite Swift by Stephen Sellis. Um, and this one um, had a recent release, and in particular, I wanted to mention it this week because it moved its documentation to the Swift package index, and that was really nice to see that there's more adoption around our documentation. And this documentation is very extensive and interesting. I browsed around a bit. Unfortunately, I don't have really a use for a SQLite database right now, but this looks like a really, really great package to interface with SQLite if you have need for that. Um, there's as part of the documentation, there's a really great overview in a section called Why Adopt GRDB, and I found that really nice and interesting because it tells you why you should use that package and also why you should use other packages. It's not a package like Vapor's SQLite kit or SQL kit that supports also SQLite in addition to Postgres and um, MySQL. And it points that out. It says, this package is doing specific things that SQLite offers, and sort of doesn't bother with the other ones, and it's specifically catered for client-side development, so iOS apps, Mac apps that have need for an embedded database, which it uses for its local app storage. Really nice. It supports migrations, database observation, has a really good extra section about multi-threading safety, how to deal with that. It uses actors and async await to make that easier and obvious how to use it. Has async streams, really all around nice package. It's been around for a really long time. Let me actually,
So I just checked, and it's been 7 years. Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. I mean, that tells you, I mean, looking at our package synopsis on the package page, 7 years, 10,000 commits, 250 releases, latest release 1 day ago. So if I were to pick a package and I looked at this and I said, yeah, that's going to be around, you never know, but
Yeah.
chances are this will be around in 3 years, with the latest release no older than a couple of weeks or so. Um, well supported, good documentation, extensive documentation, good examples. So yeah, if you need SQLite support, I think you'll do well to pick this one.
Yeah, and another great indicator on quality there is actually using the authors features that we just talked about earlier, which is saying that this is written by Gwendal and 87 other contributors. Now,
Yeah,
I think there's an argument to be made that whether whether a package is maintained just by one person is not necessarily something that is a negative. That's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, if you have taken contributions from 87 other people, there's enough people interested and battle testing and using this code in production,
Yeah.
that's definitely a signal of a positive signal towards package quality.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I think in the absence of us surfacing information like how many other libraries use a certain library, which is probably not going to be to this package's advantage because it's focused on client-side development and client-side apps aren't typically open source, so we wouldn't even capture that. In the absence of that, seeing 87 other contributors tells you a lot about adoption because it
Yes.
means 87 people have submitted changes probably because they had little things that they needed or they saw, could use some sanding off, maybe there were some rough edges or feature proposals. I think that's a fantastic indicator for how well tested and adopted a package is, without actually seeing a usage graph. Yeah.
Another real good indicator of quality here is that at the top of the README, there's a table of every Swift version back to Swift 2.2, which if you're still doing Swift 2.2, I am afraid I have some bad news for you. um,
That's actually
and
amazing. Yeah.
what the latest version of GRDB that supports that version of Swift is, which again just shows a real dedication to quality and caring about how other people are using your package, which I think is wonderful to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually great. I hadn't even seen that. Fantastic.
So my last recommendation for today is a package called Pony Express by Adam Wolf, and this, well, okay, so let me be frank about this. The reason I even opened up this package is because of the name. I saw
I
Pony
did
Express
exactly
in
the
my
same.
RSS feed, and I thought, well, I have to know what Pony Express does. But actually, once I did figure out what Pony Express did, it's a problem that I've struggled with many times. So Notification Center and I'm not talking about the Notification Center that you'll see in macOS or iOS, but Notification Center as in NS Notification Center is, I love that API. I think it's such I potentially used to overuse it. I think when we got closure support in Objective C, and then obviously we've moved far down that path and beyond it now. But I still find myself reaching for NS Notification Center relatively often whenever I'm trying to write some iOS or macOS code. But the API, while it has been modernized, is, I would say, lagging behind modern Swift APIs a little bit. And what Pony Express does is it modernizes that API. So you can, in a type safe way, you can post and observe NS notifications. So it's one of these packages that takes an existing feature and modifies the API on top of that feature, so that, to make your code a little more reliable and less likely to do unexpected things.
Nice, really nice. Does it deal with the unregistering? I haven't used notifications in ages, but I remember vaguely that you always had to be a bit careful about
Yes. So
unregistering.
it doesn't deal with it automatically, but it does give you it includes unregistering in its modernization of the API. So you get back
Right.
a token which you can then unregister from in the future. Um,
Ah, okay.
yeah.
Nice.
I also like, so the package is called Pony Express, but I also like that there's a class in there called Post Office.
Excellent.
So that's Pony Express by Adam Wolf.
All right, so my third package is called Swift Secrecy by Mattia Valselli. And this is a really interesting package when you have attributes in a struct or elsewhere that you want to mask out when you print them, or when you want to make sure that it's masked out. So imagine, for instance, you have a struct that carries a username and a token, and you want to make sure that whenever you debug, log, or print your authentication struct, you want to make sure that the token isn't actually being logged verbatim to the console, or to things that might be stored or even sent across the wire or somewhere. And this package gives you a little property wrapper at secret that you just prepend the attribute with, and that then ensures that when you print it or log it in other ways that use, for instance, string interpolation, it'll make sure that it gets replaced with a fixed string of just stars. It doesn't even try to, just mask the length. It's always, I think, 5 or 6 stars that you get instead of that secret. So that's nice. It ensures that you're safe and you don't have to worry about it once you've instrumented that attribute. One thing I did note though when I tried this out is if you use dump to log a structure, that actually doesn't mask it out. So that's something that I didn't see mentioned in the README. That's probably something to be aware of. On the other hand, dump is probably not something you would use typically for logging. But I suppose that can't really be helped, because dump is effectively using low-level APIs to get into your structure and log it to the console, and that bypasses any. So what this package does is implements custom string convertible and custom debug string convertible protocols automatically, which then override the printing of the password, and dump apparently doesn't use those. But other than that, it's a very nice and convenient way to have a little bit of extra safety and assurance that you're not spilling your secrets in the console.
That's really interesting, and certainly there is a similar feature in if you're using OS_log for your logging. There's a similar feature in that Apple API to redact secret information out of your logs too.
Oh, right, yeah. See, when I read this, I did remember reading something, and I thought initially it was the redacted API, but that's a UI. That's
Yes.
Is it even called redacted?
It's not, I don't think, but I know the one you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, now I remember. Yeah, I think it's a bit. The API is a bit more complicated than this. I like this property wrapper because you don't really have to think about it any further once you've instrumented this string once. If I remember correctly, OS log, you still need to, each time you log something, you need to qualify the parts of it that are to be redacted, right? That are private,
right,
if I'm not mistaken. So that it takes more effort at the logging side. You always have to make sure that you're vigilant there. And this is nice about this one.
This is the belt and braces version of that, where even if you are using OS log correctly, then you can always forget that you've also printed a whole load of stuff somewhere.
Yeah.
Great. Shall we wrap it up there for this week?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Hopefully, we certainly had a more smooth audio recording this week, so that's been great. And the version that ends up on the podcast feed should be perfect, because I'm going to also now put it together and edit it a little bit. We're not going to go through and edit every and out like some podcasts do, because we're not even aiming to be that professional. But certainly what you hear should be better than what you heard last week if you listened. So thanks very much for listening, everybody, and we will be back in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Let us know what you think, if this is working better, and see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.